Hi everyone, this is Karan Muhammad, a university professor from Kerbala. In this video, which is considered part 1, I'll be demonstrating an introduction to translation. Let's get started. In this video, which is considered part 1 of the lecture, I will highlight the following contents. First, translation, like the etymology of translation, definition of translation, and history of translation. And then the essential concepts of translation, the differences between translation and interpretation. Only the first 3 contents are going to be demonstrated. Etymology is a scientific field that traces back the historical development and origin of words. So we need to know the etymology of translation. The word translation has been derived from the Latin, and it was composed of 2 words. The first word is trans and the second word is Latin. Both of these words mean to carry across or bring across. Like to carry across or bring across the meaning of some text in the source language, for example Arabic, to the meaning of the target language. The origin of this word is basically Latin. What is translation? Here are some definitions for translation. The first one is according to Foster, 1958. He defines translation as the communication of meaning of a source language text by means of an equivalent target language text. This definition is limited in concept because it does not elaborate on the concept of translation. Now let's move to the second definition. This definition is according to Campford, 1995. He defines translation in terms of 2 concepts. The first one is process and the second one is product. In terms of process, it refers to the process of transferring ideas, meanings, messages, even feelings and emotions from one language that is considered the source language to the target language. And in terms of product, it refers to the end of this process. It refers to the produced, translated piece of writing. And the third definition is according to my perspective. I wrote it according to different sources. Translation is defined here as a mental process of rendering meaning, ideas, or messages of a text from one language to another without causing any loss to the original text. So basically, these are the 3 definitions of translation. History of translation. First translation did not emerge until a human began reading and writing, and that was way long after they began communicating verbally. Historians proclaimed that reading and writing appeared in Mesopotamia, like the Mesopotamian culture, the country that goes through 2 rivers, Tigris and Euphrates, Iraq, in the ancient times. So in that time, the Sumerian people wrote Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh was the first ever written text in that time. So it was rendered, transferred, or translated into Asian languages. Most of these, or basically all of these languages, are dead nowadays and they are no longer used. This dates back to the 2nd millennium. The second historical period, which is in Egypt. Egypt was a part of the great Roman Empire before Christ, and there were 2 languages were written and spoken by people then. The first one is hieroglyphic and the second one is Demotic. So due to political and religious necessities, they rendered some inscriptions and texts into the ancient Greek. Now moving to the 3rd century. In that time, the church dominated the world, especially the Western societies and regions. Therefore, there have been so many biblical translations to carry across the meaning of the Bible into many other languages. Now let's move to the 8th century, where the flourishing city of Baghdad, ruled by the Caliph Al-Ma'mun. This man ruled Baghdad for 20 years. He built the so-called the House of Wisdom, where so many translations were performed in that time. So they translated so many books from other languages such as Greece, Persia, India, Syria into Arabic. In later periods, like the Roman poets and authors, tried to render the ancient Greek books, and the purpose was for entertainment. Now let's move to the Industrial Revolution in the 18th century. After the Industrial Revolution, things like printing and distributing content were enhanced, developed, and improved, and therefore this led to some sort of feasibility to the performance of translation, where translation could be faster and more formalized. Moving to the 20th century, where people started using machine translation to translate text, and that was in New York. The last historical period of translation. In the 1990s, internet became available in that time, and this led to a rise of online translates. So apps and programs have emerged such as Google Translate, Microsoft Translate, and so on. So basically translation has passed through this historical period. And there have been so many historical periods, but I just chose the most prominent ones. The essential or key concepts of translation. First, a translator. A translator is someone who performs the process of translation to carry across the original message from the source language into another language, and he tries to maintain the original writer's ideas. A text, the material we try to translate. A text can be like any given stretch of spoken or written form, and it can be of one word as a minimal size, for example a row sign, just like stop or if, and a maximal text can be of like thousands of pages. Source language, the language from which the text is translated, for example English. Target language to which we translate the text is known as the target language. And the equivalent. The meaning of the words in the target language is known as the equivalence. So it means exactly the same thing in both languages. For example, book, and the equivalent of book in Arabic is kitab. By the way, an equivalent could refer to a word, like a single word, a phrase, a statement, idiomatic phrases, or even proverbs. Context in translation is of a vital significance because we cannot translate any text unless we are familiar with the context of that text. And context can be of different types. It could be cultural, linguistic, non-linguistic, physical, and so on. And actually, the type of the context matters as well in the process of translation. Basically, there are three contextual factors. The first factor is the author. We need to know almost everything about the author, like his principles, values, religions, like ideologies. And the second factor is the text. We need to know about the genre of the text, whether it is literary or factual, religious, political, and so on. Because every genre has its own context and, jargons and terminologies. And finally, the audience. Also, we need to know the audience to which we deliver the translation. Transliteration is the process of writing words using a different alphabet, like using the alphabetical system of the target language. For example, Allah, like it is written as it is in Arabic. Or even our proper nouns can be written using the alphabetical system of English. So, what is the difference between translation and interpretation? Now, the clear-cut line between these two concepts is as follows. Translators are people who deal with the written form of the language, while interpreters are those people who deal with the spoken language. So another difference in terms of language skills, a translator should have like a deep grammatical knowledge or even stylistic, pragmatic, sociolinguistic knowledge, and so on. On the other hand, we have an interpreter who should have a flawless command of spoken language and proper articulation. So he needs to be fluent and he needs to articulate words properly. Another difference in terms of personality traits, detail-oriented. So a translator is someone who is after details. He needs to translate like primarily every single idea. He is someone who is a perfectionist, someone who needs to perfect the text. Also analytical, so he is someone who analyzes and evaluates the text in order to grasp it well. Also, he is patient because he is someone who is after detail. He is someone who is a perfectionist, so it's pretty normal for him to be patient. On the other hand, personality traits for interpreters, he is someone who has excellent communication skills, like in terms of listening, in terms of speaking, in terms of like even pronunciation and so on. Ability to work under pressure. Why? Because he is a multitasking person. He needs to listen, he needs to grasp, and then render or interpret meaning. A good listener, and this is pretty obvious. The last difference in terms of work tools. A translator is someone who translates text sometimes by means of CAT tools. And CAT is an acronym that refers to Computer Assistant Translator. Also, he needs to consult dictionaries. On the other hand, we have the interpreter. The interpreter needs to translate text simultaneously. Also, he needs to recall words from the great repertoire of vocabulary. So that's it. Thanks for watching and see you in another video.